morning, welcome back to New Day. I am Tamima Ibrahim, and of course, this is the second hour of the program this morning. Joining me in studio, we have Innocent Owuor, and who is a lawyer and a blogger, and Mr. Marvin Gakunyi, who is also a blogger and a student journalist. So the topic of conversation, we'll be talking about citizen journalism and, of course, the encroaching of fake news on the media space. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
So, right, we do know that fake news, citizen blogger, those are now becoming words synonymous with media in Kenya and, of course, across the globe. So just give us a bit of background about yourselves and what each of you do. Start with you, sir.
I'm a lawyer
Right.
and a blogger as
Innocent?
well. Yes.
An innocent lawyer?
Now, 10 years ago, the existential question that we would ask was, who is a journalist? And in terms of the audience that consumes news, we wanted to find out who controls the pathways to the, the news audience. But with the development of the smartphone and the evolution of social media, that question has changed. Now it's who is a publisher? Because with a smartphone, anybody can go live and anybody can disseminate information. So the traditional way in which news is disseminated and consumed has changed. So that is why we have the rise in mobile journalism, or mojo, as it's commonly referred to.
So you're saying the traditional way in which news is disseminated, consumed has changed.
Yes,
and
yes.
does this have largely to do with technology?
Yes, of course, because there has been a rise in the audience, the number of people who want to consume news on their phones, tablets, and we also have a rise in the number of people who want to access news via social media. So this can be largely, we can say that technology has played a major role, major role.
And of course, Marvin?
My name is Marvin. I'm a student journalist at Moi University, and what I think right now is that there's a paradigm shift from mainstream media to digital media consumption of news. Simply because, for example, if you look at the trends at which people listen to music, everybody's on earphones when they are going to work, when they are at their workplaces. So you end up realizing there's a certain niche of something that you want to know. Some people are not interested in sports, but they're interested in politics. So social media gives you the luxury to choose what you want to hear. And then it also gives you the luxury of time. You don't have to wait for the prime time for news and all that. And lately you realize many people are shying away from mainstream media simply because I think the Kenyan audience is becoming enlightened in this sense. For the longest time ever, I think the media has been capitalizing on the magic bullet theory, assuming that people don't know what they are consuming.
Right.
So you just give them information. You think you're going to set agenda on them.
But on that point that you're raising, wouldn't you then argue that within the same space, that's why we are finding ourselves in this problem of fake news? Because there is some romanticism to the old idea of traditional media, traditional broadcasters, because you do know that if I listen to something from a traditional media, like one of the major TV stations, they have to make sure they have to fact check. They have to make sure that the news is fair and balanced. However, when I'm just scrolling on my phone, I'm on Twitter, you don't know who's sourcing this. And I think we saw this last week more than ever with these cases of insecurity in some areas, riots in some areas, pictures being used. And some of these pictures, it later came out to be that some of these pictures are not even from Kenya.
Yes.
Maybe to comment on that, because it's such a very delicate issue. I think what we are lacking is verification on news and how to use social media.
Absolutely.
Because you realize all these mainstream medias are running social media accounts that are verified. They also disseminate information. True. Much of the traffic comes from that point. So if the Kenyan audience or the users of social media are enlightened on how to verify news, like, for example, photos, trends, I think this is the best way to go.
So let's talk about that. How do you verify news? Let's talk about that for a second. Because with all my experience, a few have fooled me. And I think even big brands like CNN, BBC, they've been victims whereby somebody goes, lifts their logo, puts it on the story because they know the consumer will see the logo and think, CNN.
Yes. We have to understand, first of all, that mobile journalism as it is presents both challenges and, opportunities as well. And the challenge is that we've been seeing the rise in unverifiable news, cyber propaganda, misinformation, and that is where mainstream media now comes in, because what we've been seeing, and if you look at the just concluded general elections, you'll realize that it seems as if mainstream media was competing with bloggers, really, on who will churn out information fast. So, like I've said, mobile journalism, social media, the smartphone is going to change the manner in which, journalism as a profession is practiced. But right now, journalism is not about running around with cameras. It's about, this is where we need mainstream media to come in, verify information as consumed on social media.
Now, maybe
and also contextualize this, what our viewers.
Maybe on that, we need to clarify, because mobile journalism, there's two ends of it. Those of us who are in the practice, who are in media, we do use mobile journalism. You'd be surprised how many broadcasts are actually done from, you're live on your phone and you're actually doing a live feed of a news story that is developing. There is that angle, right? And of course, there's the mobile journalism now, which crosses over to citizen journalism, because the person who is disseminating the information is not a journalist by profession. They're a citizen. However, because they have access to their mobile and they have access to a story, they put it up. And after all, it is human nature, because, TVs, before radios, we had the grapevine. That's how our ancestors used to get the news, whereby you sit in a cocoon somewhere and you talk. So whereby now, I think the distinction needs to be made whereby there is a mobile journalism for broadcasters, because they do use, like you said, we're on Twitter. We use mobile phones, pictures, everything. Then there's the other angle now for the citizen. And of course, with the citizen, that's where responsibility needs to be ingrained. Because for me and I do know that there's going to be a reckoning. The moment I take my phone and use it to put a story that is factless, a story that has not been verified, for me as a professional in this industry.
One fundamental thing that you have to understand is that consumers no longer trust institutions. Consumers trust people.
Absolutely. And that is why institutions, our institutions, media as it is,
so why
media
do you
invests
think, for
in
instance,
people. Because if today I beg you, sir, and I think we're saying the same thing, really. It's how we are saying it, right? That's why media invests in people. Media invests in personalities. If a personality like Jeff Koinange tweets something out, chances are people will believe it.
Just a moment on that.
And the same thing even in Twitter, personalities. Some personalities who are not necessarily part of the traditional media fraternity have been able to stand out. People like Robert Alai. And we've seen where it's gotten them. I mean, over the weekend.
Free Alai.
Free Alai.
Just a moment. There's a point we shied away from, verifying information on social media. The first one is looking at the blue tick. That is the basic thing.
Verified.
Not a verified account. If somebody...
But not all accounts are verified. Because I know you're not verified. Are you verified?
I'm not verified.
Are you verified, Grace?
I'm not on social media.
So basically, if you have to believe someone, look at a verified account that is saying exactly that. If something is trending, look where it began. Don't just go and tweet and say, this is where it's headed. Just look, where has this begun? Where is it headed? Who is spearheading it? What is the agenda? Because now, you're looking at a phone as not just as a mobile phone for everyone. It's a studio. It's a pocket studio.
Absolutely.
Very compatible. Like, for example, when you're using the phone, there's an application called iMovie. With iMovie, you can shoot a video, edit, and send it to studio for viewership, right? So mobile journalism in itself is not just another application, it's a wave of change. Because for the longest time ever, people are complaining about mainstream media being intoxicated. And the only oil that is going to sanctify mainstream media and restore the position of the fourth estate is mobile journalism.
Grace, your thoughts?
There are very many concerns I have. First of all, I must applaud the Fifth Estate. It has also paved the way to creating news. However, from the point of view that both of you are raising, first you're a lawyer and you're a journalist. So you come from a very ethical point of view. Yeah. I'm looking at the common Mwananchi blogger. First, this can be tools of propaganda, yes. That is the truth. At the same time, it is a source of fake news, and it will be very dangerous, this is what I am reading from your conversation, to place the onus not on the citizen, and move it towards journalists. And it's very difficult to hold citizens to the same level of ethics as required of a journalist. So I see something on my WhatsApp, I'll look at it, looks credible, I'll send it to Tamima, next thing you know, it's everywhere. It's trending. And you can see there has been issues about such things. You see, when there was an issue of hate speech, people were being found on Twitter having retweeted issues of libel and slander. These are people who don't know. I know ignorance of the law is no defense, but it's very dangerous to place onus on citizens, asking them to look at exactly where the trend came from, do an investigation. From a journalist's point of view, that makes sense. From a lawyer's point of view, that makes sense. But for the Mama Mboga, all she knows is that, say, for example, there's been a death, like Buhari's death in Nigeria has been a trending topic for so long. The man is still alive. So the only thing she knows is that Buhari is dead. And what happened to the markets?
Story
yes.
on her mobile.
You remember Chase Bank? What happened to Chase Bank? Because of the rise of social media, Chase Bank had an issue. All of a sudden, everyone was taking their money from Chase Bank, and the bank collapsed. So social media is a double-edged sword. And I'd like us to look at it from the point of view of it being double-edged, as opposed to defending it in completion.
Absolutely.
I'm not moving with speed to defend social media. What I'm saying is we need to balance on the repercussions, or rather what we expect. Because even a photo has a positive and a negative.
Right.
Now, this is the point. Digital media, she has moved swiftly to mention the negative sides of mobile journalism.
Of course, it has positive sides.
Yes. Now,
but we cannot run away
from that.
From the negative effects of it as well.
So let's juxtapose the two.
Right.
Look at what happened to Githeri Man. His life has been
that is a positive example, because we do know that he who took the initial picture was just a student.
Yeah.
He was in line, and probably he meant it on a light note. He did not think his photo would do what it did.
Exactly.
Right?
Let's go a little bit back and remember Fatuma, Justice for Fatuma.
Yes.
You see, things are happening. It is changing life. Actually, people use social media for justice.
No, absolutely, and we support that in all ways, because the other thing is, in as much as we have, the Kenyan media is very dynamic, yes, but the fact is, the Kenyan media as it is, with all the media houses, we cannot be everywhere at every minute, at every second, and that's where you and I come out. And it's very interesting to see, whereby last week, I feel like there was a narrative that the media was not putting out. However, that narrative was dominated by mobile journalism, whereby people in their houses were busy taking the videos. And I was surprised, because there you're seeing somebody's living in a shanty. Yes, they're living in a one room, nyumba ya matope, nyumba ya mabati, lakini akona simu, ikona camera, very sharp camera. They're able to document what is going on. And really, in terms of just looking at human rights, looking at issues of promoting development, looking at issues of promoting information, it's great. We must applaud it. And not just even in the news domain, because look at it, bloggers. I know people who make a living just because they have 500,000 followers on Twitter, and all they need is their phone and the applications on it.
I want us to steer this conversation and talk about the 2017 general elections.
Right.
Because I feel that the primary role of media is to seek the truth, all right? And this truth should be impartial. This truth should be unbiased, right? And one thing that people fail to understand is that behind the conventional media houses are businesses. People own these media houses, and their interests might not be grounded on, things like democracy, the rule of law, respect for human rights, and all that. And one thing that I want to be very clear, I want to be forthright, I want to tell you that I was not impressed in the manner in which traditional media in Kenya covered the general elections. You've mentioned something very important, that in Kisumu, for instance, we saw instances of police brutality in places like Mathare North. And the media, the traditional media as we know it, was not there to cover some of these things, all right? We have police officers beating up a 6-year-old kid.
And in the
Kisumu,
same breath, it could be argued. Like I said,
who regrettably passed away.
The media cannot be everywhere at every moment. And that's why now this notion that we are calling mobile journalism, it comes into play. Like we said, it has its positive and it also has its negatives. Grace, what do you think?
And I mean, I feel like for every protagonist, there should be an antagonist. And here I am, antagonizing. Yes, and I am going to antagonize.
I'm the balanced one.
So first, you say that it's impartial. First, let's be honest. Everything that affects the current media also affects social media.
Yes.
The only difference is that social media is everywhere, at
And
every
unfiltered.
point. So if you're talking about it being a business, there are bloggers who, through their likes, get advertising. There are also bloggers who are paid to blog certain information.
Right.
And at the same time, we're talking about the death of children, baby Pendo, the gross violation of human rights in Kisumu. That's true. Those are atrocities, and we thank God for social media.
The mainstream media failed to cover, right?
At the same time, you see, there's also a lot of false information surrounding that time, because for example, in Kibera, there was allegations of, oh, this morning police are conducting a raid, and the police spokesman comes and says, oh, no, nothing of the sort has happened.
Yeah.
So you have to admit that as much as it does do
this
things,
is where we get it wrong. This is where we get it wrong.
Grace,
when you hear news of a military operation in Kibra, you don't wait for the police spokesperson to come on national TV and tell you that. You send journalists there.
You see, I'm not a journalist.
To go and find out, right?
I have a problem here. Not actually a problem, but a point I think will come into place.
Yes.
My friend is very sharp, and I think is very agitated about what happened.
Right.
The post.
But
I'm not agitated.
Our conversation is on mobile journalism.
Yes.
Gentlemen.
With reference to
now,
the 2017
with
general
mobile
elections.
journalism, let me draw myself closer to his argument about the just concluded general elections. Look at what happened. He's talking about the atrocities, rather, on how the police brutality went and did what. But let's look on the other side of the page. What were these people who are riding in the shadows of being protesters doing?
I think I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to take us back to
is-
the topic of conversation, which is gentlemen and lady, which is mobile journalism. And like we
And the
said,
core
we've
of
been
my
talking about
argument-
its positives
Yes.
Yeah.
so far in the news domain. And a lot of young people are watching us right now, right? And I think for us, really, it's to prove that with this phone, you know, and right now, thanks to technology, there are so many brands with as little as 5,000 Kenya shillings. And a good phone, you could be on your way to a good business. Yes?
Sure.
You could really be on your way to a good business. And journalism really isn't just confined to hard news. We have other forms of journalism. You can be a fashion journalist. You can be an entertainment journalist.
Sure.
Yes? And we've seen young people really just start by having a Facebook page because your phone can go on Facebook. You start a page, you disseminate this information. And like she said, eventually you get your audience, because ultimately that's what we all are after. The moment you label yourself journalist, you want an audience. Because without an audience, again, without an audience,
You're not a journalist.
you're not a journalist.
Generally, we'd say every human being has an urge to be listened to, and that is where journalism springs out from.
Absolutely.
So to me, journalism is a tool to help people tell their stories. So if I can tell a story to 2 or 3 people, in one or the other, I'm practicing a form of journalism. So this is where it all begins, and we should understand this. With journalism, and why digital media is taking the forefront right now in spreading news or sharing and disseminating information, it's because it is unbiased. I can just take my phone, shoot a video clip, and send it.
But yes, you can. But again, on the thing about bias, I disagree.
Why?
Because at the end of the day, to err is to human. We are all
Sure,
human.
sure,
yes.
yeah.
And regardless of the motives that any individual is using to post any information, it has to be questioned at the end of the day, because there are always 2 sides to every narrative, right? So what we're simply saying is that thanks to the advent of the mobile phone, right now you can get your information very quickly, by the second, and I have to commend it. How many times have you been somewhere and you're like, let me check Twitter to see whether there's traffic where I'm going. That's journalism. Because somebody took it upon themselves to let you know, hey, please avoid Ngong Road because there's an accident and the traffic is horrible. Are you understanding? So I think those are the positives that we were mentioning earlier, whereby there are some negatives and we cannot run away from it. It's not been figured out because even the most specialized, the most developed of countries, they're still grappling with it. It's a new frontier. Every day there's a new app, there's a new tool that is being used, Photoshop. So the issue of verification, it's a very murky area, but in the same breath, it's also positive.
Yes, look, I'm a lawyer. So I'm not going to talk about fashion and you know, I'm going to talk about, you know, issues that affect society. And my point is, you know, like I mentioned before, that the news consumer, the information consumer today does not trust institutions. They trust individuals, people they know. And one other thing that I want to mention is that mainstream media as we know it has failed. Kenyan media. I think
that's a very gross and blanket statement.
You've mentioned
and which is very subjective, sir.
You've mentioned something
because
about
if we have failed, you would not be sitting here.
You've mentioned
in the studio right now.
You have mentioned something about wait, and well, people saw it as a welcome distraction.
Right.
That we are talking about an election, you know, that was going. A hotly contested, you know, electoral exercise, all right? And instead of mainstream media as we know it, you know, seeking to find the truth behind some of the allegations that, for instance, NASA was raising, you know, we have the IEBC streaming results, and they cannot give us a logical explanation behind the architecture of the numbers they're giving us, that mainstream media has the time to run after Githeriman.
Maybe on that,
we have thousands of ungazetted polling stations
Mr. Innocent,
in the country, and mainstream media is running after, you know, my point
earlier
is,
on before you came on, we were talking about the NASA petition.
Yes.
And it's interesting that we're talking about mobile journalism because a key cornerstone of that was evidence, yes? And really, if there is a citizen out there who has compelling evidence that they documented via their mobile phone, you're the lawyers. Is this admissible?
My point is,
can I put a point across?
Right.
I think my friend as a lawyer is allowed to have commentaries about law, and that's why he's moving, or rather he's tending to move closer to politics and all that.
Yes,
but let's constrain ourselves in the grain of ethics and say. Yes. Now, he's talking about politics, and he's pointing fingers at mainstream media not reporting what he'd expect to be reported. He's actually now saying that focusing on Githeriman was not appropriate.
No, but again, it is a positive effect of mobile journalism.
Just a moment.
I'm simply saying that mainstream media has got its priorities wrong.
Yes, I've not concluded. What I'm saying is, for example, that man was an emissary of peace. You know, there was too much tension in the country about the elections. So the moment people started talking about...
He eased the tension.
He eased the tension. And people relaxed.
True, yes.
There was a lot of
relaxation. And I said it was a welcome distraction.
And I mean, even in the definition of news, the E is entertainment, weather, and
my
sports.
Point is,
so there has to be. It's not just going to be political.
My point is that if mainstream media does not evolve with changing times, then I'm sure that we are foreseeing a future where people will be relying on, you know, those who they feel disseminate unbiased information.
Right.
All right?
Now, just another closing statement from you, Marvin, before we wind up this segment.
What I believe in when people are consuming news from both mainstream and social media, everybody has the right to make their decisions. That's why we are even given by God, either to choose to go to heaven or hell. So he doesn't make decisions for you. If you believe mainstream media is the way to go, then you can always rely on it. If you believe social media gives you the information and with the legitimacy you believe they do, you're right.
Grace?
I think social media journalism is a double-edged sword, and it should be looked at as such. There are certain issues with regulations that we must look at. At the same time, positives in taking the country forward, and that should also be considered. So I'd say whatever you're seeing on your phone, take it with a grain of salt.
Right, well, that wraps up this segment for us, talking about mobile journalism in Kenya. Obviously, Kenya is one of the places in the world whereby citizens have embraced technology, and more so young people. And like we were saying, it's a double-edged sword. There's some positives, there's some negatives, and that is ultimately for you and I to figure out, and we must all be on the lookout for fake news. Right now, we'll leave you with our quote of the day this morning. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the role of youth in business. Please do stay tuned.